Okay, so we saw about how to delete the project. So what we can do now is, before going any further into the web interface, now probably we can go and touch upon the configuring the server. So if you remember initially when we installed the server, and we went into the configuration screen, which popped up, and then we only worked on the first tab of it, wherein we just gave the user ID, the password that it needs to run, and then the user we set the user authentication, and we said okay. So that is the first tab of the configuring the server. So there are the other tabs as well, which were this was the general tab that we worked on, and then this is the one that is shown here in this over this place is the data connections, and also we have emails, alert, and subscriptions. And also there is another thing called the SSL or SAML in here. So let's look at what data connections tab is. So this is where actually you can define how the data connections have to perform or behave. You know, so we can actually say that okay, this caching. So how much? So should we have a lot of caching, or should it be less often, or should it be balanced? So what this means is, so whenever a user is interacting with the views using a browser, the data is queried and is stored in a cache. So what happens is, uh, if the user is again and again accessing the same view, it will pull it from the cache and display it, so that it is faster. So we can actually set over here, set it whether it has to be the cache has to be refreshed less often, which means it is reused whenever whenever it's possible and whenever it's available, regardless of. Uh, mainly, what we're saying in the first option is that do not refresh the cache. So once if you have it, use it as long as it's available. So only when you don't have the data, the underlying data not changing often, then you can actually go for this refresh less often. Then you have this balance, so you have a specific number of minutes, so you can set that, okay, don't keep the data in the cache for more than 10 minutes. And then after the 10th minute, it gets refreshed with the cache gets refreshed with the new set of data, and then that is the one that gets pulled and shown to the user. And then refresh more often. This is when probably you have there's a lot of data that gets changed in your underlying database. In that case, you can actually go for this, but then it's probably not advisable because the database is queried each time the page is loaded. Okay, and so this will surely decrease your performance. So these are the different options that you can select in the caching. And also there's something called the initial SQL, so this is mainly for Teradata. So in terms of when you're connecting to Teradata data source, apart from the custom SQL that you would use, there's something called initial SQL. This just runs for once when you connect opening the workbook. So what this would do is, there are scenarios when you would really want a temporary table to be created, which will be used during the session. So when you open the workbook, this initial SQL just runs just for the first time, and then it creates the tables that it needs, and then and the work begins, and then you interact with the dashboard and the reports. Here it gives you an option to ignore the initial SQL so that you don't that doesn't get executed, because sometimes you might not want it to execute to improve your performance. So let's go to the server. Let's bring this up. So this is where you can see once you have installed your software. So I'm on Windows Server 2012. So, um, so once you install your software, the Tableau server, you can actually come back to the configure Tableau server menu option, and then do those different reconfiguring activities over there. let us just come back. So this is the one that we initially configured, and then this is the data connection that we just talked about. You can actually make it less often. So you this cache is actually used as often as possible, as long as possible. I'm sorry, it's refreshed less often. And then you have this balanced, where I can go ahead and specify the number of minutes that I don't want. I want my cache to be refreshed, and then I can also select something which says refresh more often. So this is, as we discussed, is going to decrease your performance, because every time a page loads, there is a query that's triggered to the database, and the results fetched. Okay, so that is the tab that we just spoke about, and then we can actually go to the email subscriptions. We have also have the server. I'll come back to this in a minute. So let's go and see the alerts and subscriptions. So alerts and subscriptions, this is where you actually you set up your server to send you emails in terms of, whenever there is a uh, server going down, or any of your processes going down, or it's a restart. In such cases, you can actually set this Tableau server to send you an email. So for this, though, you will have to enable this, and then you have to give your SMTP server. I'm sure your company, you would have a server set up for your emails, so we can just use those information over here to be provided here, and your particular user ID and username and password for that email account, and then you can just give this information over here, and then to whom do you need to send that email to. Probably you might have a Microsoft Outlook group, to whom you would like to send the email, in case of a failure on the server, or there's a restart on the server, or any of those kind of things that happen. You can send the email to those relevant people. Along with that, you can also enable email subscriptions. What does this mean is that you can have users go and select. Consider that I have my sales dashboard published on the server. So I am one of our sales managers, and I always want to look at this sales information every day in the morning. But I don't really need to log into the server every day in the morning to do that. What I can do is I can go and subscribe to any of my dashboards, any of the report that I want, and then I can say, okay, send me this mail every morning with an image of the dashboard. So what it does is every morning it sends into my mailbox mail with the attachment, with this, which is, image of the dashboard embedded in it, so that you can see, okay, this is how my data is looking today. So if you want to really then go and click on that image, and reach the server to then actually interact with the report if you want to. So that this is where you actually enable the email subscriptions, and this is the same way. This is uses the same um, email server that you would be giving here, and you would also have to specify credentials for that email account, and then you send that email. um, you can give up from like a Tableau admin at xyzcompany.com, and then you can this email sent to, this is the list for the email alert for health issues, and then you can have this Tableau server URL. So you can give the URL over here, so that the users, if they want, from the email, they can click on it, and then they can go to the server. Okay, let's go back to the slide a little bit. Yep. So here, this is what we are looking at. So you can actually send a Tableau server can send you an alert by email if there's a system failure, or there, and um, it can also email subscription send email subscription to Tableau servers. So which are actually, as I said, they're snapshots. It's an embedded image that comes in an email, not the report itself. So this is basically how you specify your in SMTP server, um, and then sometimes you would have to give your user ID password, and sometimes you wouldn't have to, based on how your company's email is set up. And then this is what you can do, probably say a Tableau, send from Tableau admin at mycompany.com, and then these are the guys that who need to get the information whenever there is a system failure. So just give their your email IDs, and then they'll have the emails come into their mailbox in case of any failures or restarts, server restarts and stuff. Okay, so this is again the same thing. What we spoke about. The only thing over here that gets activated is here. This one over here, you can embed your server URL, and you will not have this send email to, because the subscription is done by each user to his own email ID, right? So that's about the setting up the emails. Okay, now then we have the next tab, which is like the SSL tab, which is basically where when you are setting up your server for a secure login, this is what you would have to do. This is a tab you would have to come, and then you will obviously get your certificates. You will get an acquire an Apache SSL certificate from a trusted authority like a GoDaddy or a Verisign, or some company like that. And then once you have your certificates, you just place them under this folder here. I just place them under that folder here for the Tableau 8 server. This is so once you have it placed there, you would have those three different files, the certificates. So you would have a key file, you would have the certificate file, and then you will have the certificate chain file, which is again an optional. So once you have these two files, basically you just go to this tab, and then just navigate to the path where you kept the files. So you just keep those files there, and then come here, you select this checkbox, or you come here and navigate to the path where you place the files, and then just say OK. All right. So once you do that, once you click OK, you will have to restart your server, and then it would then turn into a secure HTTPS login onto your server. So any access to it using HTTP will be now automatically redirected to the port number 443 for the HTTPS login. Now, also one thing that you need to understand or keep in mind is that Tableau server only supports the port 443, okay, as a secure port. So if you have anything else that's running already on the 433, then Tableau cannot actually run on this machine, on that machine. Okay, so let's go back to the server here and then see the SSL. So this is it. I just say, okay, use SSL for my server communication. Then just go, I would take this, and then I would go to that particular place where I have stored the certificate files, and then say okay. And once I say okay, it will go and create the HTTPS login for us, right? Again, there are some things that you need to understand and to make note of, that all these settings are actually system wide. So whatever your settings you are doing or if configuring, um, these settings are system wide. That means if you have multiple sites running, these settings would affect all sites. Okay, and then the user authentication is permanent. So in the initial setup, when we did the configuration, we have set this server up as local authentication. So that local authentication, that setting is permanent. So in case you want to change it, to something else, the only way you could do it is actually uninstall the server and then reinstall it, and then um, set it to the other option that you want to. Okay, and then reconfiguring is nothing but that's what we did right now. So even at any point of time, if you want to reconfigure any of these tabs, you just come, you just follow the instructions, and as I did earlier, a little earlier, go to those um, windows and then select the configure dialog, the option, and then the configure Tableau server option on the Windows start, and then you can do the changes just like how we brought the dialog up and we were making the changes. Okay, so next is actually introduction to the processes. So what do we mean by processes? If you remember, we initially spoke about there are different processes that runs in a Tableau architecture. On the server, we spoke about the application server, and we spoke about the backgrounders, the data engine, and also the SQL server, and SQL server and the repository. So basically, what each of this is, so we'll just spend a few minutes to understand exactly what these are. So uh, the the application server, as we earlier discussed, this is the one that actually handles the web application. So supports the browsing and searching. So whenever we were logging into the web interface of the server. So this type of connection is handled by the web application server. I'm sorry. And the file name for this is wgserver.exe. So if you find any wgserver.exe running in your system, it is the application server from Tableau. Then it's a multi-threaded process, and that means it can run multiple. It has a multiple threaded. It can do multi-threaded operations. And then you have its what are the performance characteristics. So it only consumes noticeable resources during the infrequent operations like publishing a workbook or an extract, with an extract, or generating a static image for a view. It's loaded. So whenever there is anything of this sort, wherein I'm trying to publish a workbook. Whenever I'm trying to publish a workbook with an extract, that is when probably it consumes a little bit of resource, but otherwise it really doesn't consume much. And the backgrounder, so the second one is the backgrounder. This executes all the server tasks like the extract refreshes. We've not really spoken much about these things, so we probably just understand that this is the backgrounder is the task, is the process which executes the refresh, extracts, and things like that. And we will go deeper into what each of this is. What is a refresh and how can you schedule a refresh and all those things. We're gonna look into that later. So this basically is a single threaded process, and so what happens is, so you can actually doesn't consume much memory, but it does consume your CPU whenever it's doing a refresh. For example, you have set up, you have a large database, that you're connected to, and then you want to bring all the data into the inline in memory, into the Tableau data extract. So backgrounder is going to run that process, and then that's when probably you would see a lot of CPU and the network bandwidth being consumed, which is for retrieval of the data from um, the database tables. Then there's something called the data engine. So data engine is basically this is where Tableau stores the extracts and answers the queries. So what that means is, whenever we talk about extracts, um, Okay, so initially we spoke about the two ways Tableau can work with the data source. Now one is live connect, the other one is using the extracts. So live connection is it fires the query to the database every time it needs to, and then gets the data back and visualizes it. And the other way is through the extract. So when we say extract, it's basically the Tableau server gets all the data, and the backgrounder runs the refresh. This is the extract, and then this extract itself is basically stored in the data engine, so Tableau then actually accesses this data engine, and then the data stored in the data engine, and then the VisQL process actually generates the views, the visualization for us. Again, yeah, it does use it does use a lot of CPU process, during some time. And then again, it's based on the size of the extract that's being loaded, and all those things are being would be the one that drive how much CPU utilization is taken by the data engine. Okay, and then we have the data server. So what is the data server? So data server handles the connections to the Tableau data source. So this is what would come into picture when you're really connecting to the data source, be it connect live or be it extract. So even for extract, you have to connect once to the data source and then retrieve all the data and create the extract. So for anything that has to do with connecting to the data source, the data server.exe is the one that comes into picture. This process. So it can be run by CPU with enough simultaneous user session. So yeah, so it's a CPU intensive process. It can slow down some of the things, when it's really connecting to large databases. Okay, and then with the next one that we have is a repository. Repository is nothing but that's the Tableau server's database basically. So that's where it stores all the workbooks and the user metadata, which means the username and the user logins, and activity, and all this stuff is stored in Tableau's database, and the database is PostgreSQL. So this is so like this could become a bottleneck, as we can understand, if we have like thousands and thousands of users in a very large deployment. You could have so many users that are stored in the PostgreSQL, and all their activities being tracked in in the database, in the repository. So this might sometimes lead to performance issues. Okay, and then the last but not the least is the VisQL server, and also the VisQL is actually the proprietary language developed by Tableau, using which actually they do this rapid fire visualization, right? So VisQL comes into picture when there is a loading and rendering of views happening, and it actually computes and executes the queries. So it does consume noticeable resources during the loading and interactive interactions that's happening using a web browser. What that means is, so I load the report for the first time. So VisQL comes and draws this pretty picture, and then whenever I'm interacting with the report, whether I'm asking it to filter on something or sort on something. So all when I'm doing all these things, the SQL has to again render the report. So that's when actually it takes noticeable resources it consumes. So it depends what kind of reports that we are building. So if there is a lot of interactions, that is, if the reports are built for a lot of extensive interactions, then we have to be sure that we have a good hardware to support it. Otherwise, it can run out of memory, process memory. So this is just an introduction to the processors. So you would really need to understand, just to be sure that you know what each process is doing. So just in case you see some process taking a lot of CPU or memory. So you do understand why it's happening, so that you can just okay, explain to people if they need to be explained, or else for just for our own understanding, that okay, this is not bad. It's using this much of memory, but then that's okay because it's doing a big refresh, so it probably is going to do it for another couple of minutes before the refresh gets completed, and then the backgrounder actually would not be using so much of CPU. So that for this basic understanding, it's always better to know what the servers, what the different processes are, what do they do, and how do they behave in terms of their performance. Yeah. So this is good to know for every admin, I would say, and everybody who's working on Tableau server. So again, well, the reconfiguring the processes. So what do we mean by reconfiguring the processes? Okay, let's go back to the server once, and then let's go to this admin console over here, and you see that this says that I have two SQL servers running, I have two application servers running, and I have one background task backgrounder, basically in two data servers, data engine, repository, and gateway. So okay, so what does this mean? This means that on my server, I have all the processes running. All these processes that we listed are running in the server, and then it may be there may be one of them running, or there may be two of a single server, a single process running. So that is what information that we get out of this section over here. So similar to this, we can actually. So where is this being set? Where am I saying that this is how my server needs to look? So this is where I'm doing it. So now I can go back to the configure Tableau server. Might take a minute. So while it's coming up, let's just see this. So here you see there's the Tableau configuration. Um, this is the Tableau server configuration. This is the tab that we skipped and said we'll look at it a little later. So we're looking at it now. So what it does is, this is where you actually go and make this setting as to how many SQL processes do you need to run in the server, how many application servers do you need to run in the server. That those kind of setting is done over here. So you can actually go ahead and change it. So how to configure this for better performance? That's something that we're going to discuss at the later stage. So this is just to show you where it could be done. Where is it set? So now it's come up. So this is the section. This is the tab over here which says server. So you can see it says this computer, two SQL servers, two application servers, one backgrounder, two data servers, one data engine, and it's a repository. We have a repository on this, and we also have a gateway on this. So that's exactly what we're saying here. So what we can do is, if you want, we can actually select this and we can edit it. And also, for example, if your dashboards are involve a lot of user interactions, you can actually go ahead and increase your SQL server here and say, okay. But before doing that, we need to be sure that we have the necessary hardware to support it. Okay, so we let us go into this deeper as we go further in the sessions, so that before going there, we have an understanding of what's how do we configure Tableau for performance, and there are you can add the prime. This is the primary. If you see here, this says this is primary, so you can add worker nodes over here, and we'll go through those concepts a little later in the session. Okay, so that was about the reconfiguring and configuring the Tableau server. So just in case we have installed the software, we have done the configuration, but then if you want to change or do some modification to the settings and the way the Tableau server is right now set up. This is how you do it. You go to the Windows tab and then bring up the configuration, Tableau configuration box, and then you do the different changes that you might want to do. And so I also you should remember, once you do this change, you need to restart your server for it to take effect.